To the front of the train is our engineer, TJ. You want to wave and say hi to TJ up there? Because he won't be there on the way down. My name is Mal, I'm the conductor. I'm here in the middle of the train, and I'll be doing the talking and various other things during our trip today. First of which, to let you know, in 123 years of operation on the railway, we've never had a serious injury or lost anybody in a permanent sense, and we don't want to start today. We do ask your cooperation, though. We do have some basic guidelines. First of all, you'll notice this train passes real close to stationary objects, rocks and trees and buildings. Please don't stick anything out the window. Heads, hands, arms, children, husbands, wives, mothers-in-law, various other members of the family too, and assorted body parts. But especially keep that camera inside the train. We do regularly see trees. Slap a camera and then it's gone. Next, the aisle through the train. When this train's moving, stay out of it. Don't even just stand there to get a quick picture because this train can stop immediately. It can go from full speed to stop. And if you happen to be standing in that aisle when it happens, you're going to discover you're tumbling down the aisle. So please stay out of the aisle when the train's moving. Next, you'll notice the train is posted throughout no smoking. If you're a smoker moving into 14,115 feet, be our guest. Now you probably put away those tickets. Please get out your ticket. Take a good look at the ticket. On the left end of the ticket is a black stripe that says to Pike Peak. That's the important end of the ticket right now. I need that in. Give the ticket a little bit of a pull, tear it off. Gather them up and pass them over to whoever's sitting in the seat by the aisle. I'll be through the train here in just a moment to get that end of your ticket. Hang on to the other end of your ticket. You're going to need that for the trip down. afternoon. I'm going to be pointing out some of the scenery to you. I'm going to tell you some of the history of the mountain and the railway. And the first thing I'd like you to do is take a good look to your left. See, that's not going to work, is it? When I tell you where things are, we use a different system on the train. On one side there's 3 seats, on the other side there's 2 seats. Now if you look all around us, we've got lots of big rocks up here. This kind of rock is called Pike Peak granite. It's a very porous kind of rock. When water gets in it, it causes it to crumble and break apart. Not very good for building materials, but it does make an interesting mountain. As we go higher, you're going to notice today the big rocks are down here. As we get higher, the smaller the rocks are, because the process that causes them to crumble happens a lot more often, way up high. Now you may not have noticed at the station, this is not an ordinary railway. This is what is called a Cog Railway. Cog is not an abbreviation for something, it's a kind of gear. Underneath this train, we have 4 855 cubic inch Cummins turbocharged diesel engines. Each of our engines is driving through its own transmission to a pair of these big gears which fit into the middle of our track. If you've seen our track, you may have noticed the 2 rows of teeth. If you haven't seen the track, there will be opportunities during the trip. We're one of about 40 cog railways in the world. The one you're riding on today is the world's highest, and we climb the most start to finish. There's another one in New Hampshire on Mount Washington, which is the oldest in the world. There's another one up in Michigan, which is the newest and shortest, and it actually goes down into a hole in the ground. Most of them are over in Europe, specifically Switzerland, where our equipment is built. Up here just ahead of us on the 2-seat side, we're going to go by a big rock of no particular significance. But as we go by this rock right here by the train, look tucked in on its backside. There's a rock over here like a diamond on a playing card. See if you can find it. Today, as you look out the windows, you may see things out there that you're curious about. Well, on the way down, I'll come to the train and answer those questions. All you have to do is remember what your question is. If you get a good question, you might want to write it down. I do forgot to write it down. Now, one of the questions I get up here all the time is these trees we're coming to that have sort of a smooth, almost white bark. These are the aspen trees. They're just starting to change into their fall colors. The leaves are turning red and yellow and orange, part of what makes Colorado colorful. Above us on the 2-seat side, there's a stack of 4 boulders. Look at the top rock in this little pile. You may recognize Santa Claus's sleigh sitting there. Now, long before there was a train up here, people would come up here in the summer just to live, to get away from the heat of big cities, before we had air conditioning. And if you know where to look, you can still find the remains of some of the buildings and streets as we travel along. We're just coming into a town that was called Minnehaha. Minnehaha's Native Americans will laugh at their dancing waters. And over here on the 3-seat side is Minnehaha Falls. like they're dead. And they are. But it's not from a forest fire, it's actually from an insect known as the pine bark beetle. The bugs got in these trees about 50 years ago, cut off the tree circulation, and those trees died of thirst. Nothing you can do about the bugs. Most years they don't do that much damage, but every now and then they do considerable damage. In fact, up in Wyoming, now Montana, and even Canada, there are thousands of acres of pine trees that are dead, and some will die this summer from that same kind of bug. Now here in a moment we're going to be stopping. We'll be waiting for a train that's on its way down. While we're here, if you don't know that person you are facing, take a moment and introduce yourself. That switch. Here's the other one. Okay, TJ, you got a highball when you're ready. Now, back in the old days, we came up here with steam trains. Yes, that was a cog train too. The guy who did all the work was called a fireman. He had to shovel coal into a steam boiler. In order to get up this next hill, he had to shovel and 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 shovel. And every time we hired to do it, on his first time up this next hill, they always said the same thing when they got to the top of it. They'd look over to the engineer and they'd say, "Man, that hill was a son of a gun," or something like that. So that's what we call this hill. And if you picked up a map at the ticket office, you can see where we are on that map so far. We'll be climbing this hill in just a moment, so hang on to your seats. is, do these big rocks ever fall down? Oh yeah, they fall down all the time. We've got a crew that comes up here first thing every morning, and that's part of what they do is they take care of those rocks that came down in the morning. But look over here on the 3-seat side, there's a big rock over there with a dead tree laying on it. If you look up the hillside a ways, you can see a bigger rock that used to be part of. What about in that rock caused a crack? The crack got bigger and that piece fell down. Now it's okay if they do it over there, but they're not supposed to do it over here. Unfortunately, rocks are like children. They don't always pay attention. A couple of years ago, PJ and I were coming up here and he stopped the train right here. He said, no, there's a rock on the track. Oh man, what a rock. They're usually about the size of a football or a basketball, but this one was pretty big. We got out, we pushed it up the hillside. TJ held it up and then I jammed some little ones underneath it. It's been doing fine ever since and it's doing good today. You've got to be strong to work for this railroad. So if you believe that story, have I got a mountain cabin for you coming up here on a 3-seat side, fully air-conditioned, solar heated, plenty of fresh water, fresh air, mountain views, bit of a fixer-upper though. And we're having an open house today. 3-seat side. And it's secluded. Now long before there was a train up here, people would hike up here in these valleys and live in the summertime. Some of these trails went all the way to the top of the mountain. One of them came up this canyon. Most of the places it's sitting right underneath our tracks, but here and there we can actually see it. They would hike up to a little town that was just ahead of us called Halfway House. No, it's not halfway on our track, but it was halfway on the old trail that came up here. And they would spend the night in a hotel. The next day they could get up, walk to the top, come back and spend the night again here. Meals included. This only cost $5. Now you won't see any hotel up here anymore. It was torn down over 100 years ago. But if you watch across the canyon, you can see part of the old trail as it follows our track in this canyon over there. Nobody's used it in 100 years, so it's got trees and bushes growing in it now. Our track when we were back at the station or at Minnehaha. Those of you sitting on the 3-seat side in a moment will be able to look down out your window and see a short section of our track that used to go to the hotel. You'll clearly see the 2 rows of teeth in the middle of our track. These are called rack, R-A-C-K. That's where all the work happens on this train, both going up and coming down. The 2 outside rails on our track are what are known as standard gauge. They're 56.5 inches apart, like the mainline railroads in this country, but we just use these 2 rails for guidance and balance. If you look above us here on the 2-seat side, no, that's not the trail, and no, it's not going uphill, it's going downhill toward Manitou. That's the path of a modern water pipeline that goes from reservoirs Colorado Springs and Manitou has up here. What makes it look like it's going uphill is actually caused by how steeply we are climbing. WR, the little mountain town of Ruxton Park, Colorado. Well, in the summertime, it has a population of 2. The Smith family live in the little white house here on the 3-seat side. Looks like they've got company today. They take care of that stone building over there, which is a hydroelectric power plant, one of 4 operated by the city of Colorado Springs. You live out in the country, but I know the Smiths know they do. From their front door out to their mailbox, the driveway is just below us here, and it's 17 miles long. Those visitors they've got today are going to drive it 17 miles just from the main road to get here. Fun parts in the wintertime when they have to plow their driveways. Our winter here isn't what you might expect it. We get most of our snow on Pike Peak in March, April, May, and June. And the last time it snowed up here was just a couple of days ago. It can snow any time of the year on the top of Pike Peak. In fact, it might even snow up there today. Because quite often when it rains in Colorado Springs, it snows up here. As we travel along today, you might be wondering if we're going to see any wild animals out there. Well, they're wild animals. We don't know where they are, but if you keep your eyes open and watch the bushes, you might get a glimpse of a squirrel, a rabbit, a skunk, a porcupine, maybe a fox. There's some wild turkeys in this area, and even deer. Further up on the mountain, there's a little animal called, it's a high altitude groundhog. And then also up here, we sometimes, this time of year, get a glimpse of a bighorn sheep or 2. Now in a moment we're going to go by a sign that says lion, but it doesn't mean there's a lion here. Actually, there's a little stream over here on a 3-seat side called the Lion Creek. Now the city of Colorado Springs gets 20% of their water from the rain and the snow that falls just on Pike Peak. They collect the water into various streams and then they measure how much it is. Then that water will go by pipeline to the reservoirs that are all over this mountain. And that water comes down through the power plant to generate some electricity. The water you see in the streams up here today, you might be drinking later in a glass of water. In this area, it doesn't take long to go from mountain stream to tabletop. In the distance, you might notice trees laying on the ground. It looks like somebody came along and just pulled them right out of the ground. Well, actually, last winter, a big windstorm we had up here did that. The ones were by our track. Our maintenance crew has been up here chopping them up into logs. We'll burn those next winter in a big wood stove we have in our shop. But as we travel along, you might notice off in the distance, trees laying on the ground. They belong to somebody else. Now during the trip down, I'll come through the train and answer your questions. Now you might like a souvenir of your trip today. I've got a nice little picture book that tells the history of the mountain and the railway. Shows us coming up here in all the different seasons of the year, including in the wintertime. When we come up here, there will be snow higher than the top of the train. We had kind of a warm winter last year. We didn't even have anything like that last winter. We'll see what happens next winter. The picture book is a nice little reminder of your trip today, and it is only $4. If you'd like something a bit more active, I do have a DVD that does play all over the world. It also features our big snowblower we bring up here to clear that deep snow off the track. It's normally $30, but if you'd like one today on the way down, you can get it from me for only $14. You'd like both the book and the DVD? Together, that's $18. there's lots of aspen trees in this area. But there's also some trees out there with a real dark gray bark. These are called ponderosa pine. There's also some out there with a cinnamon colored bark. These are also ponderosa pine. So what's the difference? Age. They don't get the cinnamon color until they get to be about 80 years old. And if you walk up to one, it has a very familiar aroma. It smells a little bit like butterscotch or vanilla. There's a big old ponderosa that got hit by lightning a couple of years ago. And I'm pretty sure you'll figure out which tree it is. We were lucky when this happened because quite often this will cause a forest fire. We haven't had a major forest fire on Pike Peak in 160 years. We had a nice big forest fire just west of Colorado Springs about a month ago, and they fought it long and hard to make sure that it didn't come over here. Now coming up ahead of us on the two-seat side, we go to a little station we use a lot in December. We bring a lot of little children up here because there's somebody they like to talk to up here. He wears a red suit and has a white beard. But if you watch ahead of us on the two-seat side, we might be able to see all the way to the top of Pike Peak today, if there isn't a cloud sitting up there. And you might even be able to pick out a building on the very top of the mountain. That building is the observation deck, and we're going to be up there in about a half an hour. After Fred Barr, who built the trail about 100 years ago. He would take people to the top riding on his burros. Since it was the shortest trail to the top, it's the one the hikers use nowadays. 13 miles from Manitou to the top. In our train ride, we travel not quite 9 miles. It takes us a little over an hour and 15 minutes. If you hike up Barr Trail, it takes 6 to 8 hours. And then it's another 6 to 8 hours to go back down. So, he said there had to be a better way to do that. So he went home, he did some research, came back, $1.5 million, started buying this strip of land and building the railway. It did take 3 years to build, but they didn't even try to work up here in the winter. Construction actually mainly lasted in the summertime, and it was 18 months. The railway opened all the way to the top in June 1891, and that first summer the railway took about 3,000 people to the top of the mountain on the train. And in the summertime, that's what we do. Now, you may also wonder about the name of the mountain. It's named for Lieutenant Zebulon Montgomery Pike. He was here in 1806, which was 205 years ago last Thanksgiving. He was out here exploring the Louisiana Purchase like Lewis and Clark were doing further up north. He saw the big white mountain covered in snow, and he wanted to go to the top because he was trying to draw a map of this area. A snowstorm rolled in, and he never made it to the top. In fact, he didn't think anybody would get to the top of this mountain in the wintertime. And you know, even with modern equipment, there are times when we don't make it to the top either. And it's not so much because of the snow, it's mainly because of wind. We do get winds on the top of Pike Peak at over 175 miles an hour in the winter. In fact, back in January, February, and March, even April this year, when we started up the mountain, quite often we found that the wind was blowing at the top at over 100 miles an hour. The limit for the train is between 60 and 70 miles an hour. Now, curiously enough, on the 3-seat side. There's a pointed mountain over there with hardly any trees on it. That is Mount Montgomery, Pike Peak sister mountain, the top of which is 12,400 feet above sea level. And what you're looking at is not actually the top of that mountain, but when we get a little higher up on this mountain, I'll tell you some more about the top of that mountain. And if you watch ahead of us on the 3-seat side, you'll see our next real steep hill. We'll be on that next hill for over a mile, gaining more than a quarter mile in altitude. That's what we call the big hill. And when we get up there, that'll be the place to take your pictures. Outside are not leading. Actually, it's you. It's one of 10 lakes used by Colorado Springs as a reservoir. Now this lake is different. It's the only one up here that's natural. And no, it isn't almost dry. It's actually full. And if you look down there, you'll see there's a road. That is the Smith driveway. Now we're at about 11,500 feet above sea level. Here in Colorado, this is what is known as timberline, where the trees stop growing for a variety of reasons. The main reason is the weather. In fact, summer up here just ended, but even during this summer we had snow up here several times. Now if you look around us, it's easy to understand why they call these the Rocky Mountains. Now some of these rocks have spots of different color on them. That's actually a life form known as lichen. Some little birds and animals that live up here actually eat that. But watching the rocks, you might see little faces looking back at you. Could be a chipmunk or a ground squirrel. Could even be a little animal about the size of your fist that looks like a ball of fur. That's called a pike, which is actually a kind of rabbit. And then there are the larger marmots, and then there are the even larger bighorn sheep if we see any. Now if you look over to Mount Montgomery again, behind it is a hill with some antennas on it. Those are cell phone towers and some other communications towers. That's actually the top of the mountain. one floor. And there's a real strange looking plant out there. Some people ask me if it's a kind of cactus. Actually, it's a variety of thistle. Up here just ahead of us, we're going to be stopping and waiting for trains that are on their way down. We'll be stopping at a station called Windy Point, and it's not just a cute name. We do experience some of our strongest winds, especially in the wintertime up here. There's a stone building where in the old days our maintenance men would live. Take a good look at the building while we're here, because it does sit perfectly straight and level. They're the only bird we get up here all year round. Now we'll be stopping up here for a bit, waiting for the train that's on its way down. I'd like everybody to take a moment and look at your watch. Now right now my watch says it's 3:36. That's important to you because we're going by my watch. At 4:40, this train will leave the top of the mountain on its trip down, and you need to be on it. If you're not on this train at 4:40, something interesting happens to your body. You turn into a hiker. Now at 4:30, we blow the horn 3 toots, and that's the signal to get back on the train. Inside the Summit House, they do also announce a warning, 10-minute warning, and that means it's time to get back on the train also. Anybody on the train ever been to the top before? Do you remember the donuts? Well, up here at the top, they have the world's most unusual high-altitude donuts. These donuts go well with a cup of hot chocolate or a cup of coffee. But don't expect Dunkin' or Krispy Kreme because those kind of donuts.
Starting to look straighter now. Yeah, right. Yeah, here. The longer you look at it, the clearer it gets.
Okay, TJ, you got a highball when you're ready. Now, as we travel along up here, the plant life up here is what all the animals that live up here eat. It's called tundra. It's basically wild grasses and wildflowers. And many of the larger animals don't come up here until these plants have gone to seed, which is about this time of year. It only spreads 1 to 3 inches in 100 years. But over here on the two-seat side, as we travel along, you might think you see tree stumps. Those are actually the bottom of old telegraph poles that went to the Army weather station that was up here on the top of the mountain. Here and there you might even see some like glass. Now when we get to the top of the mountain and you start moving around, many of you are going to understand what John Denver was singing about. Yes, Rocky Mountain High. You might be a little dizzy or lightheaded up here. The cure for it is really simple. It's water. Sit down, relax, sip on a bit of water. You don't need to drink a great quantity of it, just a sip every now and then. In fact, if you do drink a lot of water, it has a negative effect. Right now is the observation deck.